Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments on bicycle travel adventures. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109, and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 425th edition of the Pedal Shift Project. It's me. I'm back. A little bit of a soundscape. I am walking in, not Honolulu, as previously advertised, but along Elliot Bay here in Seattle, Washington. And why am I doing that? That is because my audio was boring out of Honolulu, I'm sorry to say. And it was largely because, it just rained most of the day. And that was such a bummer for me personally, because as I think I quasi-previewed, I was going to go ride around on a bike and maybe go up to Diamond Head and all that other kind of good stuff. But at the end of the day, I was within a long walking distance of everything around my hotel in Waikiki. And I definitely got out there, but from time to time, I got rained on pretty well. And it always just ended up being a problem from a perspective of doing things that were interesting for a podcast. And I'm afraid I failed. I think there was one good moment when I ran into, in the middle of a major international city of Honolulu, there was a rooster in one of the parks, and it did cockle-doodle-doo, so maybe I'll drop it right here. Or not, I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, Honolulu was really cool, and the one thing that I think I took away from that trip was how much I think I miss being in Hawaii. It had been, 30 some odd years. It's got to be more than that, actually. Probably closer to 40, which is pretty bananas. But yeah, so it's been a long time. And when I was in Honolulu the last time, or the only time prior, it was really, I think, just overnight. And we got to Maui, I believe. This was my first time really, and certainly as an adult, but really getting a taste of Honolulu. It was great. I got some good food, and it was just cool to see the vibes. And it didn't match because there's a lot of folks that kind of downplay Honolulu, because I think that you often hear this from people who aren't city people. And Honolulu is a city, and some people are like, oh, it's no good, because they're comparing it to beaches and stuff like that, which, of course, it's got a pretty famous beach in there itself. But I thought it was pretty cool, and I really appreciated the urbanism in Honolulu, mostly because of the brand new, I think it's a light rail, but I think it's called the SkyTrain. You'll have to forgive me, I've already forgotten. But in any event, I really liked what Honolulu is doing to beat back its traffic problem. It has a real issue with its geography. It's basically a city that's on a little skinny part of some flat land right by the beach there, and then it backs right up into mountains. So there's Seattle, like the city I'm in right now, some geographical constraints to how it can build and be and do. And I think with some new perspectives on what it means to have a city and not necessarily wanting to be fully car developed, I think that it ends up being a much better thing for the city. And I also really appreciated the kind of cultural overlay to everything as well. And the newer dynamic about, hey, Hawaii is a part of the United States because it was taken away. And again, not to get into sort of the politics of all of that, but just the reality of what that means culturally. And I thought that was an interesting kind of thing to see that was different than my last experience there, which is basically, hey, like it's the episode of the Brady Bunch. Brady Bunch was a television show from the 1970s, if you're too young for that. But in any event, and they did a famous Hawaii episode. And the bottom line is, don't take tiki statues from strange people, I think was the lesson of that. Anyways, Honolulu, really cool. I definitely intend to go back. I think the best part about this relocation, and I say that as I turn my head and see the Space Needle for the first time today, is how close and easy it is to get back to not just Oahu, but all of the islands. And I'm pretty excited about that, and hoping that maybe after doing some research and determining what makes the most sense from a bicycle perspective. I'm really hoping to bring back Hawaii on this show as promised and as failed for this one. I think that I was not prepared for rain, which sounds really silly considering I brought stuff for here in Seattle. The problem was that I had rain gear that was built for what I'm going through right now, which is rain in the 40s and low 50s, not tropical rain. So my only rain gear was effectively heavy winter jackets, and that just wasn't a good idea. So that's why no good Honolulu audio, or really Honolulu anything of note. So I hope that maybe not, possibly in 2026, but hopefully sometime as part of this new chapter, this new adventure, that we'll be getting Hawaii into the game. I could totally see it becoming the winter destination, the winter trip that Florida has been all of these years. So yeah, we'll just have to see how it is. Speaking of winter, here in beautiful Seattle, it is my weather luck continues. Today it's in the 40s, and you may be hearing some wind here in the audio, but because it is a pretty windy day, but it's beautiful and sunny today. My weather luck has been extraordinary. I've been here and there over the last couple of months visiting here before I made the official move about a week ago, or a few days ago actually. That every time I got here, it was just glorious weather. And normally this time of year, it downpours a lot. It certainly did yesterday. And yesterday I had to go run and do some errands and found that my newly treated rain jacket needs to be retreated again because it was an absolute downpour, more so than what Seattle normally gets this time of year. So it's humbled my situation, and I'll definitely have to fix that going forward. Normally around here, and those of you who are in the Northwest view this, the rain is more kind of a light rain, almost like a foggy, misty kind of a thing. So you don't need to be too worried about big downpours like you do elsewhere in the world. But yesterday was quite different. Today, sunny and gorgeous and beautiful, which is why I'm taking the podcast outside. One thing that's really important for those of us in the Northwest, I guess I can say us now, again, is when the weather is good, when it cooperates, and especially if there's sun, get outside, because during this month and the next month and maybe even the month after that, you end up with sun. We're so far north that the sun sets usually around like 4:15. I think it's actually 4:17 p.m. at its earliest, and boy, that just comes really early. So in order to keep your brain somewhat functional, you do have to get out when the weather is at least moderately decent, and today it's just glorious. It is funny because, as you all know, the sun is my mortal enemy. When you don't get it so much, it's not so bad to get outside and get some movement going. Some additional thoughts on Seattle, just at least initially, is I think that I've got just an absolute paradox of choice in terms of where I'm going to end up locating. And I think that whatever location I end up picking is going to have an impact on the show to a certain extent. And I think that the biggest reason why is that it's the home base for where I end up taking off from. And so there's a lot to be said about West Seattle, as I've talked about. And by the way, I've gotten some really nice feedback from a bunch of listeners. So if you've got more thoughts on Seattle, particularly neighborhoods, please feel free to throw them my way. I think that West Seattle fits my personality a lot, but there is a sense of isolation is probably the wrong word, but it's certainly set away from the city. And in order to start some kind of a bicycle adventure from there, you certainly end up having to, you have to do some things. You have to get over the low bridge and just to basically get any place. And I think that there's a good argument to be said that being located elsewhere will kind of kick things off a little bit better. But really, at the end of the day, there's always transit fast forwards and some other opportunities that can position me a little bit better. But I talked about paradox of choice, and I think that's just every neighborhood that I've been to, that I've been seriously considering, and that's going to make things difficult because I thought that the right place would just jump out and yell at me, and I'm less certain that's going to be the case. Just given how things are proceeding, I've been happily in my apartment here on the edge of downtown for the better part of the last few days, as I mentioned. And it's worked out really well for me because everything is so proximate. And I don't have a bike with me at this point, but here at downtown, you really have to go to the water's edge to be able to do anything without running into a lot of hills. There's certainly routes. Down here, there's actually a really excellent bike route that hooks up with others as well. So it's not a downside from a bicycling perspective. But what I will say is, because a lot of these places are going to be in effectively high-rise buildings, the bike storage situation becomes a little more questionable. And that is certainly on my mind as somebody who currently owns, I think I've done this before, I technically have 4 bikes now. And that's going to be difficult in kind of a high-rise type of a setting. There are townhomes and things like that are in neighborhoods that are just on the edge of the downtown area. But really, at the end of the day, for someone in my place, there's an argument to be made to be looking for kind of more of the classic single-family home scenario. So to be continued on all of that. But I think that there's a lot to be said about having the ability to be able to store my bikes comfortably, to be able to continue to have multiple options, because I really do all of the bikes that I have and what they bring to me. Which gets us to our next topic, another thing that has been on my mind, and that is, do I need another one? As Mysterious James and I have been going back and forth a little bit, there are a whole bunch of really excellent gravel routes around here. And although he smartly has said, look, you can use your existing touring bike, no problem on that. You may reconsider different tires or stuff like that. And that certainly does make some sense. But I do think that gravel bikes do have a different geometry. And if I am going to consider doing some of those gravel routes, it does make some sense for me to consider getting another bike. And that goes back to which neighborhood am I going to be in? Where am I going to live? All that other kind of stuff. So all of these things are different topics that interrelate with each other. But I am really interested in the prospect of potentially some kind of a bike that will be usable for those sort of bike packing style adventures, as I start to consider that as something that I think I'm going to end up doing more of over the course of the next few years out of here in Seattle. There's some really fantastic routes. I already talked about a few of them. ACA just announced another one that's down in Oregon that looks really fantastic. Not a middle of the summer one because it would be a hot box, but boy, fall before the snows come, it looks pretty spectacular. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that's going on, and part of the consideration for me, at least, in terms of adding another bicycle to the mix. I already talked about the prospect of maybe redoing the e-bike and improving the bike itself. And instead of going, oh, this was an inexpensive mountain bike that was well regarded, and working with that, I think that maybe what I would consider doing is getting a bike that actually has better components in it and does have more of an upright kind of stance to it. Because I do think that ultimately on an e-bike, my riding profile is different. And so if I am thinking about doing, say, a 200-mile day with both of those batteries, or whatever I can approach to doing, I think I need a more comfortable setup. And so that's another consideration. And if that were the case, I could just disassemble that bike, disassemble the motor and everything on those components, bring those out, and then sell the remainder of the mountain bike on the East Coast of West Virginia or wherever. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm also thinking about. So I may be considering selling at least one bike and purchasing up to 2 more as part of this transition. And of course, if I do end up doing any of that kind of stuff, that will almost assuredly be taking up multiple episodes of this here fine program. And I'd be excited to do all of that. The Brompton, of course, is just going to be a classic, and I'm really excited to get that out here because I think that's going to be a nice sort of utility player for all sorts of different types of adventures. Seattle, like any other city, has bike theft as a piece of what's going on here. Sorry, by the way, there's a leaf blower, which I'm sure you can hear. Not blowing leaves, of course, but blowing dust. Where am I at? Pier 66 right now. So yeah, having in Brompton is such a bike theft panacea because wherever you're going, you fold it up and you bring it in with you. And I think that's pretty cool. So that's absolutely going to be on the list of things early to bring out. I may consider bringing it out as early as the next trip, which is scheduled early in January. And so that would at least give me the opportunity to have a bike out here. But because I fly Alaska Airlines, and it counts as one of my regular checked bags, and I get now 3 checked bags for free, I could bring multiple bikes if I want to. The only challenge with that is I currently don't have a vehicle out here, and so I could very easily just spring for an expensive Uber or Lyft to bring those out. But there's also the prospect of me driving my vehicle out here at some point in the spring. And if I'm not going to be doing a ton of bicycling, or at least heavy duty bicycling, the Brompton kind of does make some sense because that would be something that would be easy enough for me to bring on the light rail to my place, and there'd be no problem from there. So I feel like there's been a bit of rambling when it's going on, but largely sticking to the notes that I have here on the phone. I'm just going to check and make sure that I haven't missed something of note. Yeah, the M+1 thoughts on bikes. It's a good problem to have, but then it goes back to the whole notion of, if I have more than a few bikes, where do they end up going? Where do they get stored? What do they do? What purpose do they have? Which impacts living scenarios and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in my head that, as I said before, intersects and overlaps and will be part of considerations because they all end up having an impact on my bike adventures and by extension through this fine program. I think I have run out of things to say. This is the last non-holiday special episode of the year. Get ready for our good friend Shifty the Elf next week. And I have to say that it's been a weird year and not the most pleasant of years at times. But the one thing that I've always really enjoyed is the ability to, most weeks, get on a microphone and talk to people about bikes, because that ended up being a good grounding point for me. Whether your 2025 was good or bad or indifferent, I was really grateful to have you along for the ride. But hey, we got one more episode next week, and our good friend Shifty the Elf will return, as always, as he does every single year. And that'll be a fun show. And I look forward to 2026 and all of the new adventures that we've got coming next year.
Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.